All right, sober friends, here we are. On a beautiful day in March. My 45th birthday was just a couple days ago. And I gotta tell you, I've never felt so good in my entire life. There have been a lot of things that went a lot different than what I had hoped and what I had planned. But what I'm here to tell you is my story and how it all started. What happened, what it was like, and what it's like now. When I was growing up, I was a kind of a middle child of two brothers, two sisters. One was a twin brother, and my little brother was most times, I don't know, like a bad Xerox copy. And that's not to diss him, that's just to say that's how it was. And for me, I was kind of the invisible one in the middle of it all, just fighting for attention no matter which way I go or whatever I did, right or wrong. It was always just fighting for the attention of my parents or whomever else. And that, believe it or not, folks, was sought out through either violence, depression, anger, hostility. It was never out of actual love. What I perceived as love is what I got from my family when I was growing up. What I got from them was, this is how you act towards people, and this is how you show your affection. And how that was, people, is through straight violence, anger, hostility. It was through verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and all these other avenues that weren't healthy for any kind of growth whatsoever. Most people in their childhood, and this is the generality, this is not necessarily true for you or true for anybody else, just for me. But in my childhood, I don't have any memories of cotton candies and rainbows, or however you want to phrase it, to what would be a happy ending. What I remember is domestic violence. I remember my family members getting murdered. I remember strange people coming in and out of my house because they were friends of my father, who was an alcoholic, and they were not very savory people. As a matter of fact, most of them were just violent. I don't even know what to call them, but they weren't people that children should have been around. I don't know. If I needed to find my dad, I knew exactly where to find him. I could go straight to the nearest pub or bar or whatever you call it, and I just have to ask for him by name. And everybody knew who he was, because he'd be the one already belligerent or already falling off his bar stool and already asking for another drink on credit, and on and on and on, without regard to any of his 5 children, folks. And that's just who my dad was. We'd come home from school, there he was, drunk off his ass, just laying in a chair or laying on the floor or wherever he passed out at that moment. And that's where we knew to get his wallet and everything else and go and get what we wanted. How far does this really stray? So my mother unfortunately was the product of domestic violence, and her behavior was kind of a flight behavior, you know, fight or flight, that type of deal. And for her, this is just my opinion because I don't know, I've never asked her, but it seemed like she was a passive bystander to what he was doing, and I wouldn't call it necessarily tolerant, but she knew that if she went against the grain or went against what his wishes were, she was going to catch the broomstick again, so to speak. I use a lot of metaphors when I talk, only because I'm not sure of the details anymore as far as, you know, what real is and what real isn't, because I've drank so much. I drank for 2.5 decades almost, and my mind was complete mush, and I'm relearning everything now. 5 years sober, by the way. So that was my childhood as I remember it, and there's a lot more that could go into it, but I don't want to take up too much of your day, because I don't know, mine doesn't seem that exciting. That part was childhood. Going to school was kind of challenging because we were what people considered white trash. And the reason we were considered that is because everybody knew that my dad was a dropout drunk, and everybody knew that, you know, the things that went on behind our closed doors was no damn secret, and his arrest record for DUI wasn't a secret either. Now, I'm not going at him full-heartedly because he was an alcoholic. He suffered from the disease that I suffered from, and so it's only fair that I allow him his due process as well. And I'm hoping that he's back on his road to recovery. You know, he was sober for quite some time after a prison stint, and hopefully that stuck. So going to school was challenging, right? Us, the white trash kids and everything else, we pretty much had to fight every single day just because of our last name. And even still today, that last name is associated with kind of low-class people. And I really can't stand that to this point. And that's why I try to cultivate a different way of thinking about who I am to pass on to my son, and hope that he has pride in who he is and he can thrive in his life. We'll come to that in just a little bit, but for now, so going to school, I got pretty good grades and everything else, and I started drinking early on, and I remember my first drink was at 8 years old, and that was because I wanted to find out what was in this bottle that was so important to my father that he would choose that over his 5 kids. Well, I soon learned that, man, once that alcohol, that liquor hit your stomach, mine was peppermint schnapps. That was my first drink. Once that peppermint schnapps hit your stomach and it just burst inside and made your body all warm and everything else, I kind of got it a little bit. Even at that early age, I kind of got it a little bit. And I felt bad for my father that he would actually choose that over us. I swore to myself at that point in time, I swore that I would never, ever become an alcoholic. And I'm sure a lot of you out there can relate to that. Well, I did become an alcoholic, but not yet. I always thought I was one, but not yet. So, I started selling little Jack Daniels bottles out of my wall locker in high school, because I figured that the cheerleader girls would really dig it, and the cheerleader girls would come around if I had a little bit of liquor in my wall locker, and they'd come and see me. So that's what I did. I sold that, and I also got into selling weed, and you know, my grades were still pretty good, and the teachers still respected me regardless of what they knew it is that I was doing. And they knew that, or rather they said that I had potential and that there was no reason for me to do the things I was doing. I was good at sports. I was good at being friends with the nerdy folks. I was good at being friends with the jocks, the rappers, you know, everybody, the headbangers, all of them. And it was because I personally felt like I knew people. But I was always scared of people. And I was always scared of people because of the things that my father put me through when I was growing up. If you're getting a little sun glare, folks, that's because I'm driving home, and this is the best time to tell this story. So I had a lot of fear growing up, and I had a lot of, I guess you could say, you know, I didn't put myself out forward because I always felt like I was being judged. And I always felt like, you know, I just wasn't enough, like when I was growing up, and I was kind of the blind guy in the middle. And that's where a lot of that led me, and that's where a lot of my childhood took me, is to empty places. And regardless of how popular I was, or how well I was known, or the potential that I had, I still felt like I wasn't good enough. And I put that on the way that I was brought up. Now, eventually I got away from that for the most part. But if you ever watch this channel, then you know that I still have a lot of fear. And I'm working on that character defect, and I'm working on those shortcomings of myself. But I digress. So there I was, about to finish high school, and you know, most teenagers, we feel like we know more than the world, and we know more than any adult could ever know, because that was their time and this is our time. So there I was, getting drunk all the time, hanging out with my friends, getting high, and You know, I started hanging out with girls and everything else. And I ended up dropping out of high school somewhere in the middle of my senior year, which was probably the stupidest thing aside from letting my alcoholism get the best of me. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I wound up being homeless for about a year, and I ended up living in the woods. What was kind of cool about that is that I was on my own. I had my own freedom. I had no gates, nobody to answer to, nothing. And the way that transpired is I had a fight with my little brother one day when I was at my apartment, and I hit him. And when I hit him so hard that his chest started to bleed. And I felt so afraid of myself and afraid of what I could do that I thought it was best to leave. And so I did. I picked up and I left, and I ended up in Baltimore, Maryland. And I bought a tent at the Walmart that was there. And this tent was yellow and white, and it's wintertime almost. And so if you can imagine, there are no leaves on the trees whatsoever. And so I put this little tent up, and I put it in the woods, and I started living out of it with the little bit that I had. I was getting food from this girl that I knew, and I was getting food from a nearby Chinese store and a 7-Eleven. And I ended up working at that 7-Eleven, by the way, because you could eat their food there. I could get cigarettes and some food off of the credit from the paycheck that I would receive. And so I was eating that and drinking that every single day, and I had nothing left. That job was getting a little exhausting, and I guess I got tired of it, and I ended up going to a Friendly's restaurant. A Friendly's restaurant, for those who don't know, is kind of like just a sit-down place where you can get some nice hearty food and everything else, and some ice cream, and I ended up being a soda jerk. Well, folks, a soda jerk is someone who just makes ice cream and all that stuff, and I made milkshakes and whatnot. And I could also eat my food there off of credit, so that's exactly what I did. Every single night I would have a very full meal off of the credit that I would have out of my paycheck. And then I would go to the tent in the woods. After a while, this recruiter started coming around the job that I was at the Friendly's, and he started asking me, if I was interested in joining the United States Army. And I was like, no way, dude. I was too busy getting high, man. And he kept coming around over and over and over. And I found out a little secret about Army recruiters is they get a little stipend to feed their applicants if they have interviews with them and stuff like that. So I would call him up at least once or twice a week, and I'd be like, hey man, you ready to talk about this Army thing? And he would take me out to dinner and all that. He knew what I was doing, but he would still do it. He asked me for my address one day so he could come over and have me take the Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Battery, which is a test just to kind of see where you would fit in with the United States Army and what kind of jobs might be available for you. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so he asked me for my address, and when I gave him the address, he went and found it. It was a false address. It was 5 Ashland Boulevard in Baltimore, Maryland. It was a false address, and he ended up finding my tent in the woods. And what he did is he tore it down, and he put a larger tent up, some cots, which are just little sleeping beds, some MREs, meals ready to eat, and some water and everything else. And I thought, man, I am living it up. And the tent was as big as a castle, people. I'm telling you, it was huge. And that's a lot of ands. I'm going to try to cut that out, but who knows? I might not have edited it at all. And so he asked me to come live with him in order to get my stuff together and be able to go into the United States Army, because he knew I was getting high, and he probably wanted me to stay with him in order to come off of it. He said, look, man, I'll put you in night school and you can graduate high school and everything else, and we'll go from there. And so I said, okay, that's cool, man. I ended up at his house. I don't remember how long. It wasn't very long. I remember that. And I was taking psychology at night and and something else. And on top of this friendly's job, I was stressed. I was trying to get high. And I was like, man, I didn't ask this dude for any of this. And I was high one night, and I was like, look, man, screw this. I tore this whole tent down. I destroyed it. I destroyed everything he gave me. And I hit the bricks, man. I ended up going to Gaithersburg, Maryland, where I ended up rooming with some people. And there I was again, getting high as hell all the time, working at a bowling alley, which was kind of cool at the time. But it occurred to me about a year later is that I was in the same place, doing the same thing, and achieving the same result, which is the definition of what, people? Insanity. And so I said, all right, fine, I'll join the U.S. Army. I ended up joining the U.S. Army. I excelled in the U.S. Army. I excelled at almost everything I did. My occupation, my physical fitness, my weapons, getting drunk, the party guy, you name it. Getting in trouble, I excelled at it all. I excelled so much that it was culturally accepted as long as everything was in order. So accepted, by the way, that I remember we had a party one time in a barracks, which is just an apartment building for soldiers, and we had a keg party, and some people had arrived who they didn't pay for the keg yet, and they were still trying to drink. I had some sort of argument with that because that meant that was drink that I can't have. Anyway, so I picked a fight with the biggest dude I could find, and I leaped over a keg. I remember smashing him in the face, and his face was bleeding all over the place, and then like 5 guys beat the crap out of me. And then all I remember is ending up standing in front of this place where we have like a watch so that people don't get in trouble in the barracks. And I just passed out right into the concrete floor, bloody as hell. Somehow, folks, I ended up in my own bed, covered in blood, with some girl next to me. Don't ask me what happened. Don't ask me how. I can't even begin to tell you what occurred. So moving on. There I was. This was a normal thing. Weekday. Every single day. Every single night. If I wasn't working, I was partying, getting drunk, getting high, messing around, getting in trouble, all of it. But it was culturally accepted because of the way that I ran my occupation. Can you believe that? So in terms, the Army was the catalyst that helped my alcoholism excel to a height that I never even thought possible. Now, I'm not blaming the Army. The Army is a great establishment and a great profession of arms. What I'm saying is I found a loophole in it, and I exploited it as an alcoholic in order to do what alcoholics do. And if you're an alcoholic like me, you understand exactly what I'm throwing down. So that went on for decades, people. I'm telling you. But the problem is when you become a sergeant or a leader, that kind of gets frowned upon a little bit, and it's about time to stop partying, and it's about time to stop being selfish and give of yourself to soldiers so that they can learn, they can train, and everything else. Along the way, though, the real hiccup and the real monkey in the wrench, the real wrench in the monkey, all that, is that I ended up getting married. I got married, and I'm telling you, this is where this story turns a little bit into real life, because it goes away from being this culturally accepted drop dead drunk to holy shit, I got a family, what do I do now? There's a lot that I'm probably gonna miss because this story is so huge and so full of things that if I told you everything, you'd be sitting here for 4.5 hours just for the small portion. So I'm gonna wrap it up just a little. So there I was, right? I ended up getting married, and the night I got married, folks, the night I got married, I got so drunk that I thought my wife was gonna sleep with my platoon sergeant. my wife, who I just married, like literally 2.5 hours before that. And so there I was, starting a fight with my wife on the night of our wedding, and holy crap, if that wasn't a warning sign for her to cut, sling, and run, because that's exactly what I would have done, folks. She didn't run, though. This girl's a tough woman, and I'm telling you, if she wasn't so tough and she didn't have so much love and compassion, I wouldn't even be sitting here right now. That's 100% fact, and you can take that to the bank. So where are we going with this? I took her on a loop run, right? What I did is I made her drink at the level that I was drinking in order to make me feel good about my drinking. And that is something a lot of us alcoholics do to the people who we love who are with us. Because there's either two people... Wait, no, I said that wrong. There are two people that are going to fit into our life cycle as an active alcoholic. And this is a generality. So if it doesn't apply to you, throw it out your ear. And if it does apply to you, drop a comment below. And hell, even if it doesn't, drop a comment below, because those comments are going to help somebody along their journey. So there it was, making my wife drink like I drink. I would table her up every single night when she got home. What am I saying with that? I'm saying that I found out that she liked to drink sweet drinks. So I would make her nice margaritas, and I would call it cocktail night. And so we would have cocktail night every night. And I would drink every night. And so that was weighing on her, and that was getting at her drinking like that it should have got at me, but it didn't. And there came a point where she was like, no, man, I'm a grown-up. I don't need to drink like this. And I was like, well, screw you. I'm drinking. You can't tell me not to drink. That turned into a whole nother ball game. So I started verbally abusing her. Now, I'm not proud of this, folks. So if you're ready to write some hate comments, put them in there, because someone else is going to be like, oh man, maybe I'm doing that to my wife or my husband or my dog or my cat. So I started verbally abusing her, making her feel bad that she doesn't want to drink with me anymore, and that she's just trying to control me, and blah, 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 blah. And the reason we don't have any money is because of her, and blah, 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 blah. The real truth of the matter, folks, is that I'm the one that wasted all the money. I'm the one that destroyed our lives. And I still am trying to wrap everything, like all the puzzle pieces. I'm trying to put them all together to figure out how the hell that happened. If I could take back all of the nasty and violent and derogatory and critical, egotistical things that I've ever said to her, I would. But I can't, man. And all I can do is try to make a living amends day by day. And that's exactly what I do in my life in sobriety, folks, is I try to live amongst people and for people versus myself, because that's all I did in my past. Now, that's not to say I'm not going to stay sober for myself, because that's 100% certain. If anything comes in between that equation, it's out of here. It doesn't matter what it is. And the reason is because if I get back into that insanity and that hamster wheel of that self-thinking and get down on myself and everything else, it's all going to turn out the same, if not worse. Oh, I'm throwing my story out there wrong. But you're getting the point, right? So there we were, right? Part of my journey. I went to combat a lot. And I can't even tell you the volume in which I've seen things that people should never see. And that goes with any combat vet who has been through the thick of it. If you ask them, have they ever killed somebody, their answer shouldn't be, hell yeah. Their answer should be silence. And the reason is because there's no pride in taking someone else's life. There's no pride in picking up body parts off the road. And there's no pride of piecing your body back together again. I'm serious. What that does to you, though, is that kind of scrambles your brain, and it kind of makes it like a bad egg salad sandwich, one that has been on the shelf for like 3.5 weeks. Dry, no cold air. And the thought processes that go through your head are somewhat skewed throughout the rest of your life. And it takes a lot to deal with that. And it takes a lot to deal with that on top of being an alcoholic or an addict. And you can ask anybody who is a combat vet and an alcoholic or an addict what that dual struggle is. A lot of us go through it. And that traumatic effect can stem all the way back to, you know, if you're a rape victim, if you're a victim of child molestation, or just child abuse in itself, neglect or abandonment, any of it. It all has its own effect on the way you drink and the way you use and the way that you see your use or drinking. And if that makes sense for anybody, please drop a like and drop a comment so that this video goes out there. Because I don't know if I'm going to make another video, folks. I don't know if this is the end of YouTube for me. I don't know what the future holds. Now, I'm not saying that I'm giving up, but what I am saying is that, you know, I feel that my message should be asked for and not for me to assert it, if that makes any sense. So back to the story, right? There's a few times where I ended up in my drinking history getting violent with my wife, and just a few. And that's not an excuse either, and it's definitely not acceptable. But I shoved her once or twice, and I know that I broke her spirit a little bit, and I'm glad that she's stronger for it. Now, that's not glorifying anything. That's just putting that out there. She is the strongest woman that I know in my life, and I think that she knew deep down inside there was someone good inside of me, and that she was going to see it through. And God bless her soul, because she did. And guess what? I have a 16-year-old son as well, and my alcoholism took a toll on his life also. The way that happened was, and the pinnacle point, I'll just put 2 pinnacle points out there because I'm not going to, again, waste your time. On his 10th birthday, this is one of the turning points in my drinking history. On his 10th birthday, I decided to stay home. Not decided, but me and alcohol decided it was a good idea that I stay home and get drunk. So I did that, and I ended up going into a hallucination and a violent rage, and thankfully I was by myself and with nobody else, so the only one I could hurt is myself. I ended up going into the violent rage and hallucination and everything else, and I started hearing a bunch of voices telling me that I should just kill myself, and that my life was not valuable, and that there's no reason for me to go on living, and there's no reason for me to even give a shit. And then my phone had about 9 messages on it, and I was like, what the hell? And so I looked at it, and it said things like, you missed your son's birthday, don't bother coming home, your son doesn't want you around, he doesn't understand why you don't call, blah, blah, blah. So apparently, me and alcohol decided that I was going to miss his birthday, and that, you know, it was better off that way. Well, damn old alcohol. My worst girlfriend ever. And so I did. And my wife and I ended up separating for about 1.5 years, maybe a little more. And, you know, I don't know what happened in her world in that period of time, but for me, I went completely berserk. I went insane. And I was drunk all the time. And I think there was not a moment, I mean, even at work, I was still walking dry drunk. And after work, a very minute after, I was drunk again. And that cycle didn't end for that whole period of time. I'm not sure exactly all the things that happened during that time, but I can tell you some of them weren't legal. I also know that I lost myself within that period also, and my girlfriend alcohol kept telling me everything's cool, we got you, and I started hearing we got you, and I was like, who is this we? What are we talking about? So apparently there's more than one alcohol. I was completely lost, folks. So as my condition worsened, I began to look towards, and some of you might get turned off, that's cool, but I hope not. I began to look towards God. You know, I thought God forsaken me a long time ago when I was a kid, made me live with that other drunk, and made me go through those things that I had to go through in order to be here now. I don't know. Apparently that wasn't true, because I'm sitting here because of my higher power. Folks, if you've enjoyed this video and you've gotten a little value from it, this is only the first part. I am going to drop a second and maybe a third part here in the very near future. Probably tomorrow and the next day. I don't know, something to look out for. If you've gotten any value out of it whatsoever, please hit the like button, take a chance to subscribe. Even if I do decide to stop doing YouTube, I'm leaving the channel up because somebody's going to get something from what's on it. So hit that subscribe button, because you don't want to be able to miss, or hey, you don't want to miss anything within the channel that can be of value to you one day or another. And that goes for anyone out there who is suffering right now or who might need some help. There are links below for anyone suffering that needs help right now. Check them out. Let me know what you think of the video. And yeah, that's all I got for today, folks. This is One Sober to Another. I'm Wayne. I'm an alcoholic. And guess what, folks? I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.